you've done something I think really interesting, and we talked a little bit about this. You really started out not just as the engineer, as the founder, but you've transitioned into CEO, right? You've transitioned into hiring a staff, and I think you had 32?
Yeah, we're 32 right now. Yeah.
32, yeah. And so you've transitioned, and a CEO is a job description, right? You can nail down their skills, what's necessary, and that's not necessarily what you have as a founder, right?
Right.
What was that like? That transition? You had some people that were helping you with it, or are you studying, or how'd you make that?
You know, I studied a lot of other CEOs. You know, I think my whole life I've been trying to study people like that. But yeah, there's no better way to learn than to just do it, you know. And so, and I learned the hard way. I find a way to learn hard because then I remember it.
The scars.
Yeah, and there's, you know, man, learning people and managing people. I had really not ever managed people outside of like a technical design world.
Yeah.
And I really learned to just hire good people and get out of the way, and then, you know, be kind of their parachute, you know. And yeah, now it feels like, now the CEO role, I keep trying to like pull in the founder role into being a CEO, and it's not the same. It's like I'm just messing stuff up. People are like, Kyle, get out of here. We have a process for that. I'm like, all right.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. I see people that are struggling with it too, and they also think that because they're a founder, they're entitled to the CEO position.
Oh yeah.
They just feel like that's who they'll be, right? And that leads to the end. You get the end of the rope,
right,
and you got nothing else to hold you. And everybody in the company, if it's building any momentum, starts to recognize this stuff.
Right. Yeah, that is a weird thing. Yeah. It's like a lot of people feel like, that entitlement is an easy one to like slip into. Yeah. Luckily, I've been humbled by all my failures, so I don't have much of an ego left.
Product market fit. Do you feel like you have it? Right, we're just talking about it, right? Some of the traction you've had, obviously, the company's been doing really well. It's been growing. You're talking about the volume of stuff that you're doing. There's a lot more in front of you.
Totally.
But there's a ton of evidence.
Yeah. I think I hit it. I mean, it's not necessarily the solution that people wanted, but it's the solution that they need. And so there's, you know, I still have competition out there, but I really came at the problem from a hook, you know, and so where everybody else is still automating around filling cones, I'm like, dude, like, what are you guys even doing messing with these cones, you know? Like, and so, it's a bit of a paradigm shift. So you do have to you have to change their minds about a few things. They're always like, well, how can I make it a cone? I'm like, no, forget about the cone. You know, like, shut up about the cone.
Yeah. It's interesting. You say, because that's kind of a founder dilemma, right? It's not what they want, but it's what they need, right?
Yeah.
And so that means you're convincing and educating the market, and that's one of the most expensive things you'll do.
Oh my gosh, yeah. It's horrible. Yeah, and really it's a struggle in the beginning, but you know, I always liken it to the flip phone and the iPhone. You know, it's like eventually everybody's like, yeah, I can't believe we're doing T9, you know,
right.
And it's, you know, it's starting to happen in Oregon. Like, you probably know, like Benson Arbor, and they're crushing it, and they're like one of my first customers.
I actually did notice that they don't.
Yeah, and they have phenomenal joints. Yeah, and so, you know, and Oregon is starting to flip, so now the dispensaries are going to their, you know, who they're buying from, and they're saying like, hey, you got to get a RollPros Blackbird to compete with these guys.
Right. Yeah, that was another interesting thing I think we talked about was looking through the supply chain is the value add starts to change from the last person that's sitting there doing the fill or the roll back to the growers, back to, or even back down, maybe even potentially back down to the front line, the bud tenders, the dispensaries.
Totally. Yeah, the
right?
bud tenders.
Which opens up the market. And
Yep, and they get it. They're,
Yeah.
they try one of these, and they're like, most of them don't touch pre-rolls. So it's like pre-rolls kind of have a bad name because of the filling them with like dry flour.
Oh,
And so the bud
interesting.
tenders are usually connoisseurs, and they're like, and I'm like, hey, you got to give these ones another try,
Yeah.
because it's going to be fresh flour. It's going to be a lot better experience. So yeah, it's fun watching them. Like when you finally see somebody's like mind like flip, and they're
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, I get it. It's like there's like, who do I make the check out to?
Yeah.
It's like that's a nice feeling.
That's awesome.